All right, everyone, good morning. Let me get the volume down and kind of switched over. Welcome to another Stoneridge Confab. Hopefully, you guys have had a fantastic week. It has been pretty dang crazy for, I think, all of us at Stoneridge so far. It seems that everyone is having conversations regarding, obviously, some of the functionality that we're talking today about, and also ERP in general. I know, Marcus, you also had some vacation as well, right? Didn't you?
Yeah, a couple days up to just up to Mille Lacs. It was kind of nice.
Nice and enjoyable. And Adam, you took vacation too?
I did, and it was much needed, and it was very awesome. And I geeked out a little bit on some work stuff here and there, but for the most part, was good fam time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So yeah, I did the same thing too. I think the week before took a little bit of time to sit back and relax with the family. So it was good to be able to get out and enjoy some time like that. So, but that being said, coming back, of course, business never stops, and lots of new exciting things obviously occurred in the past week as well. The Inspire event, if I remember correctly, also was going on, and so we've got a confab that we're going to be doing at some point here to really talk about more of those features as well. You give the hands. You're muted, I think.
Oh, I was whispering data flex.
Data flex, and all
Yeah.
those concepts, right? Yeah, exactly. The new name for CDS, CDM. It has been confusing though, right? I mean, you talk to somebody about common data model and common data service, and they're like, what does that mean? What's the difference?
Preview for that roundtable, that Inspire roundtable that we'll do. It's all in the name of really, really, really cool teams teams as a framework development, and we're really pumped about it. Naming aside.
It'll be huge. It'll be huge. So today, I think, guys, we were looking at really starting to drill into some more Power Apps examples. We've been doing this Power Hour because, we basically have had Power Automate as one of the topics that we tackled for an hour to start talking through some of the concepts that we can use to integrate with the ERP systems and CRM systems that we have. We also obviously talked a bit about the common data service and common data model in a prior one. And so the Power Apps portion here today, guys, is really around then obviously Power Apps and what we can do with Power Apps and what we've actually done for demonstrations and even for production type code that we're tackling as well. So today I think what we want to do is just kind of do that same format that we did before, where we're going to go through and show examples of different types of Power Apps that we have. Obviously with Marcus, he's focused on the Business Central capabilities, so understanding how we can use that and the integration with it. Adam's more on then the common data service, or what I'd classify really as the Power Platform, the Dynamics 365 for sales, right, which is really what it's built off of. So that'll be one. And then I'm going to kind of go through the last part of it, where I've got an app that had to be created for a demonstration that we're basically showing the capabilities of how rapidly you can create then different components that then snap in to different architectural components too, more specifically AI capabilities inside of my app, making it so that you can save information as well then back into finance and operations, and just highlight how we can tackle that and use those technologies today. So I think it'll be fun. If you're new to Confab, one thing to note, we're watching chat the entire time. I know Rob's on. I know if you're here on the team, please say hello. We're happy to have you on here. If you have questions as we go through it, or even comments, like, we love the banter. We love talking about technology. So Leah, good to see you. Marcus, nice that you're on chat as well there. So, but we love talking through technology. So as you have questions, feel free to basically ask them, and we'll try to incorporate that into our conversation, and even talk about some of the concepts that are out there as well, right? Because really with Power Apps, just to kind of frame this, we have the ability to do Glacier. Rob, that's awesome. I want to go to Glacier now. Dang it, it's been a while since I've been out there.
It's been a while.
I know. I went to the West Glacier whitewater rafting when I was younger. Just a lot of fun in that area. But that aside, what we really want to do today is really show the concepts of Power Apps, right? So how do you do a layout? Like when we start interacting with these, there's different types of Power Apps. There's model, canvas, right? And I know, Adam, we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. But the point is
And
that
Portal.
and Portal, right? And so the point is though is that it's a different layout, right? It's a blank canvas, whereas we're so used to in ERP tackling a certain way or form design when we're actually doing basically any type of application that we're creating. So we're going to talk through the advantages and disadvantages of those different types of Power Apps and the connectivity that's related to them, and really just start showing, those capabilities and what those design concepts should be in your head as well, because you're not limited now to a set UI, for example, for some of the types of apps. You're not limited to how you can actually communicate with, for example, saving an image to a database. You basically have a lot of flexibility from an end user perspective even to go through and do that. So I think I've rambled on enough. Let's get into the meat and potatoes because we like showing software. Marcus, I'm going to bring you up on screen here, and we're going to flip over to our presentation mode. Haha. And Marcus, I see your screen. Let me enter in full screen here.
Nailed it.
Look at that.
Are we gonna see that that? Never mind. Let's just. It's already train wreck.
Yeah,
train wreck. You had a test user in here. It was like a test contact or something, and it was reminiscent of an actor. It's probably gonna come up at some point in the next few weeks.
What?
Oh, that was Scott's. Okay,
Yeah.
Never mind. I've already derailed this.
Yeah.
No, I did in a former ERP product though. I got to know some of the development team, and I did end up in the demo database. My actual name was in the demo database, so I always made sure during the demo to show Marcus Haug as a customer. But
That's
anyway,
so
that's a different
cool.
topic too. Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to just specifically look at really Power Apps as they connect to BC. So a lot of questions about how does that work and can we do it and that sort of stuff. So these are some of the things that have just come up during demos, I think is when most of these have come up, just to, people have said, can I do this and can I do that? So, they're not going to be super sexy like Scott's going to show us in a little bit. But that's okay. At least you can see some functionality here. So I'm just going to kick into this one. And really, this is just a simple customer dashboard. So, I had a client one time and they said, why can't I just see, everything about a customer in one place? And I said, that's actually a great example of what a Power App could do. So this is pulling BC data. So if you're familiar with the smaller BC data set, these are customers that are in the database, and it's pretty simple. I'm pulling the customer record. I'm looking at the balance due, days past due, terms codes. Those are all just on that customer record. I have integrated some Power BI. I think I showed that last time, and just applying a filter to a Power BI report based on the record I pulled. I'm pulling up open transactions, which is just a basic filter. But if I want to show all of them, it's a simple button there to turn all of them or some of them on, or just paid, etc. And then I can actually drill into transactions as well. Did I not have this?
So this is actually then just basically looks like it's a tablet layout is what you created here. Is that correct for it? Okay.
Yeah, you can put this on the phone. The problem with using the tablet layout on the phone is you can't read it. It's not readable at that point. I would start with then a Canvas app using the phone layout. You could use the same pieces then to make it work.
Yep.
But it's pretty basic. We can close this out. I think I talked in the Power BI section that this is really just, if I go to the advanced side,
Thanks, Hocknell, for the
passing
follow. Go ahead, Marcus. Sorry. Yep.
Passing the the parameter back. So I've set on my report layout, I'm basically just set up a page filter for the customer ID, and then I'm passing the customer ID back to the link for the Power BI report. So it's pretty simple in terms of filtering the data. This is regular just Power BI stuff. This report happens to pull, or this Power App happens to pull out of the CDS. So what I wanted to do was use the CDS to generate this report, and I just used the get data function. Went to the API from Business Central, and that just automatically created the entity. So it was really simple in terms of getting, that core data back into my CDS environment, although I'm using the wrong name here, although this still says CDS, so I'm going to say that. But it's pretty basic. Caveats here, this is basically a read-only form.
Okay.
Right? So I'm pulling data from Business Central into the CDS, and I'm presenting it to end users. These could be scheduled refreshes. Quite honestly, if people refresh twice a day, I'm sure that's probably live enough, for most individuals. Although these CDS pulls can be scheduled, I think down to the minute, that you could update.
It is a minute for the data flow. So you set up a data flow with it, I'm assuming. Is that how it works? Okay. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So
I'm not using Power Automate. I'm using just the data flow right within CDS.
Yep. So there's a section that you can, when you're in Power Apps, and I'll highlight it too, because Marcus, I did the same thing for some of the static tables. An example is like the warehouse on-hand quantity. I have that syncing to the common data service every minute. I don't need to update anything back to the common data service then in terms of on-hand quantities, other than when an order is generated or a requisition is generated, for example. So that makes sense. So you can then have that data for other applications if you wanted to use it too, right? It just makes it easier in that regard. Okay.
Yep, absolutely. Just a preview, what we're seeing in the fall is actual connections back to Business Central with the entities.
Yep,
so that's
virtual
just a
entities.
preview for BC users. They're coming, and they'll be here this fall. So pretty straightforward app on that one. What I wanted to show on this app then is this is actually a write back, and it's not super sexy, but if I want to put a new phone number in, so let's do all 8 so that you can see it's actually updating. I hit update, and it's using the patch function via the Business Central API to update the phone number. So pretty straightforward. I just like to go over to Business Central to show you that it actually did update. So it actually wrote back, and it's a live, near live integration back to Business Central. So in this example, I'm actually using the Business Central API connector to connect. So that gives me basically the ability to not only pull data out of Business Central, but I can write back using that connector. Some caveats with that connector, though. It's limited in terms of the tables that are exposed to that connector. It's also limited in terms of the fields that are exposed. So, for example, the vendor table, it's not really the vendor table that's in Business Central. It's a limited field set that show up through the API.
Okay.
Now, using an extension, I did this. I think was that last. I think the last confab I showed that we actually created an API extension, added it to the system, so you could create your own API and then update via that if you wanted to. You're not necessarily logged into the default set.
Yeah, and so the patch too, just to kind of identify that. So on your update button, right? That's where you actually then added that patch statement. Yep, there it is.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So pretty simple. This is actually well documented.
Yep.
It's the table, this item that I'm on. I did it as a button. There's multiple ways that you could have done it, but pretty basic, just so that when I hit the button, I know the patch is being executed, and I'm just passing the phone number based on this text input box. You could do it on anything. You could have the record presented and then update it. I just did it so you could see the building blocks here.
Yeah, and
it's pretty simple.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really good point. So this is low code, right? It's not no code. I mean, you could argue that these are formulas, but then once you start getting into variables and all that kind of stuff, it's like, well, we're creating code with it. And then in my app, for example, I do have a lot of code that's in certain areas that's building out things. But what they really do is they try to make those much more like Excel, right? Much more function-based, as opposed to being able to create your own different types of functions, basically, and methods to be able to access those. It's not usually what we're doing inside of here. So another example beyond patch is that there's the submit form, right? So if you have a gallery component, you can actually take the gallery or the record and do a submit form, and you don't have to then do a patch. A patch is really a way to really I guess be much more granular in how you control how your record's being created. So it's really cool that you're able to use that then though too.
Yeah. So this is just the phone number that I could update.
Yep.
So again, if you wanted a Power App with limited update capabilities, this would be the way to do it.
Yep.
It should be noted too, while we're on this topic, that there are a lot of Power Addicts, Power App Power Automate and Power Platform aficionados that are out there that have compiled. So if people are a little spooked by this, there are a lot of resources out there in terms of like, the functional consultants or the if you don't have a background in CS or like myself, I really wasn't living in Excel formulas for years and years and years. So it really helped me out anyway, understand some of the more complex formulas you might need to throw into the mix, and just getting solid footing on some of those introductory concepts when you're starting a Canvas app build.
Yeah, Carl was like, so we're gonna move to Lisp. That's what we're gonna use.
Hey, to Rob's point, so the hyperlink that opens the transaction, that is completely doable. So in Business Central, you can link to a direct URL and you can actually pass a record variable to it. So if I open up in the example of I could link to this vendor card page, for example, and actually pass a vendor ID, the key of the page, to the URL. So to Rob's point, absolutely doable to then link back into Business Central to a specific record. Yeah. Scott, to your point, I'm just going to point this out. I did have to set up the variable for this customer ID number. There's some good documentation. I didn't exactly when I went into this know, well, how am I going to set a variable, declare a variable, all that sort of stuff. I went in it totally blind. A lot of good documentation, and I think, well, Adam, you said, to your point, there's a lot of good examples of, okay, you want to set a variable based on hitting a value in a drop down box. That's actually the help article I found, walks you straight through it. It's fairly easy to read through some of that and figure out, well, where do I need to actually do this sort of work. So,
and the beauty here is that you can do this quickly, do this plumbing, right? Don't worry about the visual aspect yet. Maybe worry a little bit about the types of controls that you're using, gallery versus table and things of that nature. And to be honest, like, I don't know if we want to get into that level of detail on this conversation today, because there's tons of documentation on when do you use a gallery versus not. So when I do my app, for example, I have a lot of gallery components that are related to it. But the point is that you can rapidly prototype something here to even, like, as part of a joint process design discussion. I mean, if you want to, while you're doing the joint process design, you could actually have working with it. Exactly, like,
just bring it up.
Exactly. Start looking at the data as part of the center around this, and then just do the base concepts that are related then to creating a list. And then, because that cultivates,
the gallery lets you do that.
Exactly, and it cultivates conversation too, because I think one of the biggest failures inside of most systems is that you've got a concept that a person or an end user has in their mind, and when you're working with them, you may see it differently. You may see it conformed as well to kind of your own stigma, to what what ERP should look like or CRM should look like. So having that conversation with them to see the controls also helps them understand what those restrictions are as well as we go through this process. So this is really cool, Marcus.
Yep. So real basic, just single page app showing just some specific functionality. So.
Awesome.
Good.
Cool. And then one thing to note too, I just want to highlight this. I know that you use the API. You can basically create in Power Apps a custom connector that can access anything inside of Business Central, and it goes both ways. I just want to highlight that, because that is a fact. There's documentation out there. If you want more from us on that, we know how to do that, how to create those custom connectors. Basically, what you do is that in Business Central, we have web services. You can take a page and publish it as a web service. You publish it as an OData web service, and then you create a custom connector using Swagger. And this is a little more detailed, but the point is that if you want to expose something, once you understand how to create that web service, get the schema, and then define that in the custom connector, you can use that custom connector with basically any data item that's inside of Business Central. And that goes both ways.
Yeah, that's a really important point.
Yeah.
The other option you have is the extension API. So there's some good documentation out there. There's actually a couple really nice knowledge base articles about creating a purchase order transaction. So they create a custom table, custom page on that, send the purchase order data from the Power App, and then leverage a code unit within Business Central to actually create the purchase order document.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because I think that's been the biggest barrier is that, it is not to the point where you can just, for all the APIs to have exposed, it's great, right? We can consume that
Yep.
data and do something with it. But the moment that all of a sudden you're like, well, I got to add something to it, it's like, well, you don't have to create code inside of Business Central. You can
That's right.
expose it and then from there consume it as well. It's just more, it's an IT perspective at that point to enable that capability. So. Cool.
And then again, this is changing in 2 months.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. Virtual entities.
It's getting easier
Data.
in 2 months,
Data.
I should say.
All right.
I'm just every now and then I'm just gonna pepper in data flex.
Data flex. Data flex.
There you go.
Awesome.
All right,
That's good.
I'm handing off to Adam, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I think
All right.
so. Right?
Yeah.
I think we're good. All right. Well, then let me share up quick. For my piece today, I'll start sharing here. We good?
I see it. I think the
Awesome.
audience sees it too, hopefully.
Cool. So for today, we wanted to hit a number of corners. So Canvas app building, like I would say the Canvas app capabilities that we have, especially when it comes to Business Central, finance, supply chain management, are revolutionary. That is not stated lightly, but the ability to build point solutions for based on specific requirements. I mean, this is huge news, and it's been huge news. I've been living primarily in model-driven app creation and design for, well, I mean, forever, since it's really based, like CDS, DataFlex is based on based on the XRM model. Building these has been second nature for quite some time. So for today, I just wanted to show, let's break down mystique about model-driven apps, portal apps, Canvas apps. We've already seen pixel-perfect app construction and some of the pieces that Scott and Marcus were talking through, or Marcus and Scott were talking through. But let's break down some of the mystique and some of the confusion on these things. Canvas app, completely custom, pixel by pixel. You can tailor that. Model-driven apps, it's going to have the same look and feel as D365. So D365 customer service and sales and field service, and that's where I think some of the confusion comes in, is this abstraction between, okay, well, what is a first party app? Well, all of them are just model driven apps. When you are in D365 sales or you're living in D365 field service, you're living and working in a model driven app. The really cool thing these days is that we can ground up build our own with a much cheaper license model. So, we're talking $10 or $40 per user per month versus, the other, the professional and enterprise for the other first party apps. And it's really cool to be able to structure this off of your data model and build these custom point solutions in a somewhat structured and familiar territory, if that makes sense. So today, I just wanted to walk through, hey, let's build an app. I already have a couple of entities built, and I will say this whole conversation is predicated on understand what your requirements are. So understand where the need is going to be most met, or where the capabilities match those needs. So if we do need advanced capabilities, completely custom, we need to embed this and share this, and it does need to sort of break the bounds of what we have in model-driven apps or in D365-esque, use cases, then look at Canvas apps for sure. But, if we're looking for a structured, process-driven, visual process-driven, data model-driven type of experience based on our requirements, this is where we can look. So that's just the level set.
And that model driven, so just, my experimenting with this, you create some entities, and if you've got your entities built the way you need, spinning up a model driven app is minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it would be prudent to start with like the classic feel, so what did we used to do in XRM builds? Well, we would go into Dynamics CRM or Dynamics 365, and we would go into our solutions. Hopefully you're not using the default solution, but we would have a number of solutions here. And so we'd kick up a new one, and we would start building our entities here. So we would throw in custom entities, have a couple of out of the box or our common data model entities in there. And this is where we could go in and start, working on form design and playing around with the attributes and building what we this XRM point solution. So this is the classic version of doing things, but now we have this wonderful, beautiful maker portal, and we have our solutions down here. So I highly recommend packaging up all of your customs and configs into a solution, so it's managed and portable and easy to find and easy to build out and up. But for today, I already have a solution that we're some of the components that we're going to use. I'm just going to go right into building. We have a number of apps in here. You see field service and project service and whatnot. I'm just going to go up to new app and go to model driven. So this is if you're going in fresh. Hopefully you have the schema built, or if you have flows or anything else. We're not doing that. We don't have enough time today. But what we are going to do is go in and throw in contract management app. I was going to say for Confab, but we'll say Confab app, and it will be focused on contract management. So, how do we manage contracts? How do we manage certain properties? Things like that. So you can give it a unique name, go for it. Further down, we can use, this is just the boxes here, the default image you're going to get. If I uncheck that box, however, we can go surf through all the image web resources that we have in our system. And there are a ton. I found a nice one. What was it? Invoice. There was something in here that I wanted to use. Confirm invoice. That's the one. So be sure to if you want to tailor that, if you want to customize that, you do have to have that existing as a web resource in the system. But further down, use existing solution to create the app. You can. So if this is selected, then we can use. We already talked through some of the solution packages. Choose a welcome page. So if you did want to use some of the the guided help, or that the just helping end users, I generally, or consultants that I know, people that I know, tend to just say, don't show me this again, and click out of it. And it's not something that's super pertinent for us, but for an end user base, this is something we can throw into the mix. And then down below, this is where we can enable mobile offline. So if you have mobile offline profiles that are built out, I think by default we'll have field service in here. And then there are a couple of sample mobile offline profiles that are in there as well. We're not going to do that today, but this is where you would designate the highest level configuration items here. But we have our name. I changed the icon here. I'll say done. It'll load up for a second, and now we're going to go to the application components. So what's going to be included in this app? So it's broken out into your main sitemap, any dashboards that you would like to include, and then any business process flows that you would like to include. So we'll just start with our sitemap. I'll go to edit here. And this is where we structure, what we're going to include in our sitemap. So if we go to new group, we'll say, I'm just going to take some cues from Microsoft here and go my work, and then new sub area. So you have your main areas you've got under the components on the far right-hand side here. And this is the same canvas experience we have for building business process flows, for business rules, everything like that. So on the right-hand side, go to components, and this is the hierarchy of that sitemap. So for area, this is where we can introduce. In the bottom left-hand corner of your model-driven app, you'll be able to flip between the different areas. So this can be advanced or something like that. But for this, we'll just say contracts. We'll just keep it pretty high level. My work. So we have our main areas, and then down below we have our groups. So these are the kind of the subheaders. If I go to group and drag another one over here, we're going to get new groups under my work and new group. This is where we can put our more discrete components. So things like entities or dashboards. And then when I highlight that, you can see on the right-hand side, we have the selectors. So type, dashboard, entity, web resource, URL. I can go to dashboard, and down below we can select our default dashboards. This is where I can go, again, already created, so this is already in a solution. But if we go to, where was it here? Oh, I just had it up. It was our contract management dashboard. It doesn't matter. We'll pick another one here. I swore I had it. Vamp. No. We'll do sales activity social. That's a pretty common one. So you can set a default dashboard on the dashboard sub area, but if I drag another one over here, we can plunk that underneath dashboards. We can throw in activities. So this is where I can go to type, entity, and this is where we have our selection, our entity selection of everything in the system. So this is where, I like to go and select activity, which is not a discrete activity. This is not a task or an appointment or email. This is just our activities. And you can see that it does default to the plurals as we plunk them in here. So under new group, this is where I can go title, customers, and throw in another component. We'll drag over. I'm trying to be speedy about it, but also make sure that I'm doing it the right way. Hence me like yammering on about nothing and vamping.
It's good to talk like that though, and that's what we do in demos too, right?
Definitely. Under customers, this is where I'm going to select our core customer entities, accounts and contacts. So account, we'll throw that in the mix, and you can change the title. You can update it if you'd like to override the default that's right here. But I'll drag over contacts here now, so you can see how quick this is. I mean, with relative ease, we're going between, we're building out a complete sitemap. So entity. And what's nice here is I can actually just type in instead of going through that whole scroller to go to contact, and it'll do that for me. We'll add one new group in here, and this is going to be contracts, and we'll throw in a couple of areas here. So we'll do type entity, of course, and then under entity we'll do properties. Believe it's the second one, properties. So this is the business case here being contracts for properties. So if we have parking lots, garages, storage spaces, anything that a property management group might be managing day to day. We also have markets that they're living in. So I'll drag over properties. We have another entity of market. So I'm not going to go through the rest of this, but you can see how easy it is to structure a sitemap. You save this and you make sure to publish it. Otherwise, those changes will not be reflected. So I'll publish that up. So we're going to leave it as is right now. There's more to it, and I actually have the app ready to go just in case we hit any snags. So just for time's sake here, I realize we're a little past the bottom of the hour. So it's easy enough here to build in the highest levels, the intermediary, kind of the subheader, as well as the discrete areas of your sitemap. So this is, you might not be fully equipped to build everything into your sitemap right away. This might evolve. You might have more components. You might build more into your solution based on requirements or needs of your business. But just to get a baseline, just to get something started here, you can start with something like this and then build out from there.
That's really cool. So the point here too, just to make sure I'm aligned too, because I don't know if others are thinking the same. So the entities that we were looking at, I mean, basically what you've done is you've gone into the common data service, clicked on the entities, created a new entity, then defined the fields that are in there. So like Excel, I mean, what I've been doing lately is I actually design an entity in Excel, and I click on the load data, and then I actually have it create the entity, and it recommends the data types that are related to it. So that way I've got that core structure in place with it. And then I'll go back to the entity and then do the updates like the auto number, the min-max levels that are required by field. And then finally too, the forms, right? So you can click on the forms then to add the layout then of those forms. Is that a correct statement? Is that kind of what you did before?
What I ended up doing actually was starting with a solution. So based on business requirements, going through and going to here's that contract management or the solution that I was talking about.
And then add the entities there.
I built my own data model. So I started with some of the common data model tables, right? So account, activity, contacts. So this is included in any CDS that's spun up, any CDS database. But I threw in lot contract type, market, property type. So all of these are custom entities. These are custom tables that I actually created. I didn't do the import method like Scott is talking about. I created here. You can see new. And this is where we can create a whole new app, dashboard, entity, and this is where I would go in to create a new entity. So this is where that table was structured.
Cool. Just to show that, I mean, it's easy to add this. We're skimming this part because there's a lot, obviously in terms of just defining the fields, and it's kind of boring to watch a programmer type in field names all the time. So I can totally understand.
So in just the core app designer here, structured the sitemap, dashboards. This is where if you click into that, you're going to get, I have all checked here, but right now, and if you don't check all, you will need to select one. You can see that that's defaulted in. So this is where I wonder what I called it.
I think it was the first one, wasn't it?
Agreements.
Oh, that's not it.
That's not it. I had another one in here. It might just be that one that says overview because I fat fingered something. But this is where you can we'll select the agreements main. So this is where we can actually control when I'm speaking with prospects or customers. The concept of an app. I mean, app can be a buzzword, and we hear that there are apps for everything. There are Canvas apps, portal apps, model-driven apps. But think about it as a controlled user experience. So especially with respect to these model-driven apps, we can create this app with certain dashboards, and then down below you can see, by entity, we can even include just certain forms, just certain views, charts, and the dashboards per entity here. So we have a certain level of control. We have a certain level of granularity when we're thinking about the user experience, and we're thinking about reducing the noise. If it's just customer service reps that are in this app, or if it's just contract managers, well, a whole fleet of territory managers on the sales side, the contract managers don't care about leads and opportunities. They don't care about the product catalog. They don't care about all these things. So let's reduce that noise. Let's reduce that clutter. So they have only what they need, or they have, in an efficient way, have what they need to execute their day-to-day, week-to-week, and don't have to sift through a bunch of other entities, records, just clutter.
Yeah, and it's not separate data, right? I mean, before we could do that, but it would be a separate database, and you have to maintain and sync it and all that kind of stuff. Not with this. It's the same data, just a different view of that data.
Exactly. So from dashboards, we do have business process flows. So I do have a property, I think it was like a property management flow that's in here.
Yeah, Dave said reducing noise is underrated, but it is important, especially with end users when you get confused on a process, right? It's just totally agree.
For sure. So this is where we would select our business process flow. I do have one built for this use case. So that would be included. Down below, we have our entities. So if I didn't want to include all of the account forms, this is where I can go and just select the ones that we need for activities as well. We can select the forms per entity there, and then we can go through not just the forms but the views. So if we went to the activity views, this is where we can parse those down and whittle those down to just the essentials as well. So this is structuring your user experience. We're building the sitemap, we're including these artifacts, and we have our entities, and per entity we can even get to that level to include only the essentials and reduce all the noise. So that's the ins and outs of the app designer. So we kind of hit the app designer, the sitemap creator, some of the entities and the solutions and things like that. Now I'm going to show you the one that we already had ready to go. So I'll go to my apps here. And we're not going to go into the Confab app. We're actually going to go into the contract management one, but I will play this one. So it'll load up, and it's going to look like Dynamics 365. So we have the same structure. We have our access to all of our Office apps and what we have licenses to. We have our our search capabilities and advanced find and some of the features here, and then we have our familiar sitemap. So in those areas that I just structured, we have our My Work, so dashboards, activities. We have our customers, so accounts, contacts, properties and contracts, so lot contracts, properties, markets, and then down below we have documents. So if you recall, when I was going through the sitemap and we had the option of including dashboards, entities, web resources, or URLs, this is actually a URL to this organization's SharePoint site. So this is where we can actually go, and if we needed to just find certain documents, if we didn't need to go and access the customer data, the 360-degree view, if it really were just the paperwork, just the contracts, this is where we can actually go into on the SharePoint side and take a look at the folders, any collateral, any artifacts, anything we have living on SharePoint. So this is a URL that's embedded in the sitemap here. So
That's awesome.
Here's a contract management overview. Must have been a personal dashboard. But we have our active accounts. We have contracts in play. We have just contracts over time. So looking at month breakdowns, and then we have my activities. Super easy within a model-driven app to go and start structuring your own, out-of-the-box dashboard. You are going to face. You will see Dynamics 365 pop up here and there. But it's the same experience. It's the same UI. It's the same design methodology to get these pieces structured to start creating your own apps. So if I go into any of these records here, hey, this is the unified interface. We have the same look and feel, the familiar look and feel. If I'm looking at this diamond lot at the Mall of America, we have lookups. We have this is D365 for all intents and purposes, but it's a custom app. Like, this is not anything that we purchased from Microsoft. This is something that I built from the ground up with my own business process flow up top, with my own forms, with my own entities and data structure. So all the pieces that you see here, including the accounts and contacts, those common data model entities, this was all a custom build. We custom themed it for Confab as well. So this is cool stuff, and it's really fun. Even like as a functional consultant or as a functional solution architect, like myself, I didn't come up through the hours and hours and days and months and years of coding. It's an excellent way to structure business process, to structure data, and to get this in the hands of end users with efficiency and huge value add at the end of the process. And just as an added bonus, if we want to queue up our couple things to close out, Scott, I promise I will wrap up in a second here.
No worries.
But if I do a quick share here, come on. Come on now.
Not a demo unless something doesn't work.
Well, that's true, but this has been solid for forever. Yeah, there's something wonky going up with my mirroring app.
Well, I guess you're going to show, I'm assuming it's just making it so that it is wireless, right? So that you've got the mobile capabilities now with this too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to show the consolidated experience in selecting the apps from the Power Apps app. So instead of logging in through D365, you log in through the Power Apps app, and you have your Canvas apps and model-driven apps all in a single list, and you can play from there. So the mobile experience is really slick.
Really integrated with it.
But just to show you, we can do this another. No, we can't.
I shut mine off. I'm sorry, I can't. I had that going a little bit ago, but I shut it off.
Yeah, and if we come back to it too, Adam, we can, as I go through it, if you get it working, we can highlight it then as well. Oh, that's really
all good.
Cool.
The last piece here is that if you have, I have a couple of Canvas apps that are here. We have our model-driven app that we have here. What's really neat is for both now, where we used to have some of the more advanced telemetry and analytics and monitoring and testing features really living on the Azure side of the fence. If you really wanted to get to the low levels, we now on an app-by-app basis for both types or all types, we have the ability to monitor. So if I go to monitor here, we're going to land in really just a sort of a transactional hub with nothing in it. But when this comes up, you'll see connecting to the session. And then we have play model-driven app up in the top. And obviously, if this is a Canvas app, you're going to get a different rendering here. But if I play this model-driven app, it'll shoot us into the app we just created. And then it'll say, hey, join monitor debug session. You are now joining. Hey, it's just what you're doing is being monitored. So we'll join. And it has this... data flags. So we have this app is currently connected to a monitor session. So what's neat is if I go into any of these contracts, I go into these records, we start playing around, we start rendering screens. If I go back into the monitor session,
look at that.
Nice. We have, obviously it's flawless, so we have all these successes. But no, we get a lot of information here. So not just the overall health of these different like API calls or script loads or anything that's that we see on the screen. We also have the data source. What's really cool is if we launch a Canvas app say this is just one of the pre-canned Microsoft ones for onboarding, these onboarding tasks. Let's launch a Canvas app here quick, and we can do the same. So it'll connect real quick, go to play published app, and we'll load it up. And as it's going through all the calls, as it's authentic, it's doing its thing. We're going to get the Canvas app. You mentioned earlier, Scott, it does have a little lag today.
Yeah, there's a little lag today on it. We've got there are demo environments obviously as well, so I'm assuming that has an impact with it. But
yep. So here we have, this is just it's a little onboarding app for like task management for new hires. So we're just going through again a tablet, kind of like Marcus's tablet breakout. Have my photo up, updated. We have some complete tasks here. I can write an about me email for the team. And if we go back to that monitoring session, this for Canvas apps, you're going to have a lot more stuff. Like you're going to probably be calling you could be calling multiple data sources, and we have the different controls and properties. So the cool thing about debugging and looking at these actions and calls is not just the compilation of said data, but we can download this data as well if we wanted to work with it
and see errors.
Yes.
When I was going through my entire experience of building it, right here, like you see there, it's like, well, what was happening? What's the reason for it? So 404 forbidden, right? So yep.
Click into it and you're actually going to get payloads, or you're going to get you'll see that we have time and name, and we have much more discrete data as you click into each of these debug transactions that are in here.
As Dave would say. Dave says huge. Absolutely. Huge. The request and the response then as well. Yep. And then the response. Yep.
So if we, if we go through this,
that's the error message for you.
And that's what it was. Like, and I don't have a manager in this demo environment, like in AD, like my manager isn't set, so it bombed out on a couple of steps.
Well, then you can encapsulate it, right? Because that message pops up at the top of it, and it's like you see it in the Power App, and as an end user, like, what did I do wrong? So, right? So, how do you speak JSON?
All right, I've spent too much time. I'll kick it over to you, Scott.
Yeah, I will just jump into it as quickly as possible here. So let me move this over. Thank you, Adam. That was a lot of great detail. So, I guess what we covered with Adam really was around the model-driven apps. And I think the key thing to note with model-driven apps is that really what you're doing within them is that you've got a set of entities, you've got forms that you're using, you're building that structure. But what happens if you want to create a very unique experience? What happens if you want to control more of the layout and the GUI and the controls that are there, add custom controls, whatever it is, right? So inside of the model-driven, you can do that, right? I believe that there are ways that you can do different types of JavaScript and things of that nature, if I recall. Is that a correct statement, Adam? Custom controls.
It is, but here are the days where we can even embed Canvas apps within model-driven apps if we want to get to that Christopher Nolan Inception level. Yeah. And it's more of the low-code, no-code solutioning around that kind of stuff. Hey, developers, we've said this a ton over the Confab, the many Confabs. We still yes, there are, we can throw scripts and plugins and some of the extensions and customizations into the mix. So you're not that is still vitally important, but it feels a little different these days. But short answer is yes.
Exactly. And so what I wanted to do then is that I actually have a presentation coming up at noon today that we're going through and talking a little bit more about then the capabilities from a Canvas-driven app. And so what a Canvas-driven app is it allows you really then to control basically that entire layout. I always equate it to a blank canvas. So you can create different controls, different shapes that are on there. And so it's a little bit harder to design in some ways because it doesn't have a lot of the, stereotypes even, or the concepts basically that you have in a development environment, a rapid development environment, but it does still have some control over it. And so one of the apps that I have inside of here is actually a plant management application that I created. And with this plant management application, what I wanted to do is I want to highlight a couple of things. Number one was directly going to FinOps to grab data. Number two was calling flows to be able to update update records inside of the system. And then number 3, of course, I wanted to use some type of artificial intelligence capabilities in my app. And I'll show you the reason for that in a second here. But let's walk through this a little bit in terms of the application design so that you guys can kind of understand a little bit of where those concepts are and why they're so different than what we were looking at before. So inside of here, I really didn't have a single entity that I created in the common data service. So I did create one eventually so that I could have some quantities basically that I would reflect inside of the application. But really what I wanted to do is show a multi-screen application that has multiple things that you can do inside of it from an end user perspective, and then also try to make it very easy from an end user perspective. So as this loads up in the background, you're going to see that here is the application really at a high level here to start for the main screen. So the concept, there's a couple of different concepts obviously that now change within a model driven app. One is that you get to control what your end user experience is going to be. So for me, when I think about an application on a phone, for example, I really think about touch, and I think about transparency effects, and I think about things that look good. When you have a really nice app on a mobile device, even some of those pop-ups that occur and then fade away, for example, and how they blur the background potentially, those are concepts that really you have to start thinking about for these types of apps if you want to make something that really is interactive, that provides the right type of element to an end user to interact with. So on here, the very first screen that we have is a home screen. And the purpose of this application was to be able to tackle 6 different types of processes. Number 1, I want to do inventory lookups. Number 2, I want to do deposits at the plants as customers come in and give me cash or an order form. I want to be able to put in a requisition for items. I want to be able to look up orders and receipts. And I also want to be able to then ask for support from IT if there's a specific issue that I have, maybe not even around this application, just in general. And so what happened here when I went through this then is I really started building out then all of these different screens, as you can see. So as we go through this and just take a quick look, you can see that there's all these different screens that were basically developed by going up to the new screen action up here and then adding a particular screen then into this environment. And when you do that, I'll just show an example just really quickly here. We won't save it. I'll do, for example, a new list page that we would do with it. And when I create that, you can see it adds the screen, and basically it doesn't have any of the data hooks that are enabled, but it does a lot of the plumbing for you. So it creates that gallery component. It goes ahead and then it sets, for example, the layout of that particular gallery. And then from here, you can do layout movements. You can change, for example, the title information. Very typically, I go in here and then set it to centered as part of it. I'll add, for example, an icon inside of here as well, and go ahead and, for example, do the back icon as part of this. Add it inside of here, bring this up over here, go ahead then change the color that's related to it as well, and you guys kind of get the hint as I go through this. So you have a lot of control then to be able to go through and make those changes. Now, one of the rapid departures then from a model-driven app is that inside of a canvas-driven app, we can actually go through and then have different actions that we can interact with. So on the far right here, what I did is I'm still on this particular control, this back arrow that I have, but what I can do is that when I select that, I want it to do something. And what I want it to do is I want it to maybe navigate. And I want it to navigate to the home screen as an example. And when it navigates to that home screen, I want it to do a transition where it fades the screen when we do that. I've just now made it so that a particular button, when I click on it inside of a canvas-driven app, goes to a screen. So that's the basics of the navigation. So now, as I do that, and if I click on my Alt and hold that down and click on this, it'll bring me back then to my home screen as part of that, right? And then I could do the same thing, that same concept. For example, when I look at a deposit here, you can see it navigates to the deposit list. When I look at my inventory, it navigates to the item list. So a really simple concept in terms of being able to navigate then through the actual application. Kind of finally here then, let's just go through a couple of the more advanced features then too. And if you guys want this application, I'm more than happy to give it to you. I can actually package it up for you so you can see it. But one of the capabilities was really integrating with Flow, for example. So inside of here, I've got a deposit snapshot screen that I have that basically goes through and then generates a flow as part of this, or creates or fires off, excuse me, a flow as part of that process. And in here, you can see that we can get pretty advanced in terms of what we're doing. So I know, Herb, you were talking about JSON. Here's how we talk JSON inside of Power Apps. So you can see here, I've got a collection of tables and fields, and then an image that I'm actually setting. And these are variables basically that I'm setting. And what I'm doing is I'm then calling a flow and then passing these variables to that particular flow. So if we go look at our flow and we go to my flows inside of here and just take a really quick look at this particular flow, what we're going to see as soon as it loads up here is that I've got a form processor AI model flow that I've created, and in this particular flow I have variables that I'm initializing. And basically what I've done is I click on the ask in Power Apps, so that way when you create a flow for a Power App, if you set the variables on the initialize at the very beginning here, it will then know inside of the Power App that it requires those particular variables to be passed from the app into the flow. So I've got 1, 2, 3 different ones that are inside of here, and then I've got some parsing that's occurring. This is much more technical, obviously, for developers. Usually, basically, we're taking that structure of that JSON and validating that it's a string or an integer or a decimal. And then finally, what we're doing here is we're creating a record, and I'm creating a record in the deposit headers as I go through and do this particular process. Now, that's actually taking a snapshot of data to be able to go through and do that process. So what I wanted to highlight here really is that, number one, we can use Flow to do that, but what we can also use are these AI builder components as well. Now, part of this plant management app, the feedback that I got from the client was that, you know what, Scott, we're never going to move away from paper. When we have customers come in, people like to write their order form, basically. I don't know if you can kind of see it. Here's my order form right here, right? I'm faster at doing it this way. I don't want a tablet. Tablets slow me down. They're a pain, blah, 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 blah. But the problem is that from accounting's perspective, they need to be able to match then these orders to the cash that they take at these particular facilities. And so basically there can be a week delay before they get all these orders, and those deposits that maybe they're doing daily are not aligned with that cash perspective. And if you're an accountant, I know you're probably just cringing right now, right? So why don't we make it easy? Make it so that, you know what, I'm not going to fight you with the paper. You want the paper? We'll do the paper. But why don't you take a screenshot after you're done with the paper, kind of like an expense, and at least we'll have a record then in finance and operations or in the system to represent then that we have that. And just maybe, if your handwriting isn't that horrible, it can recognize a lot of the text that's related to it as well, and maybe even eventually generate, for example, an order. So let's go ahead and just show this. I'm going to show the app, and we're going to go through a couple of the use cases with it. So I'm going to go ahead and do my app, and let's go ahead and close out of here. So there we have it. And back here, let's close all apps. Let's go to my APK.
Scott's mirroring is going to work
Exactly. I hope it does.
Without a hitch.
I don't know. We'll see. Device has been mirrored. You know, Adam, I think this is the mirroring issue day, I think is what's happening here. Like, why are you not
solidarity
working? Yeah, exactly. So let's go ahead and go back here because I've been doing 15 things at once. Let's close this out. Exit the application. APK again.
I can vamp. So this is really cool stuff.
This is amazing.
You know, like for me anyway, you know, I absolutely have been building Canvas apps and model and portal apps for a while now, but it's really cool to be able to see a lot of these core concepts and some of the newer ones come into focus, namely the AI builder, which along with, I would say, Power Virtual Agents has been like my go-to. It's been so fun to get hands-on with that and coach these models to parse all these pieces. You know, the flow artifacts that you have in this solution, Scott, are really awesome. So it looks like it's coming up.
Yep, we're good. So let's go ahead and go through
Successful
this.
phase.
Exactly. That was perfect. Thank you, Adam. So I'm going to click on inventory, for example, here. Going ahead and then clicking on the inventory, we can see as well that there's an update as well that I can actually update to if I wanted to as part of this. So I can go through and then do that update if I wanted to, but at the same point here, this is basically going back into finance and operations to grab the data. So I've got my inventory list. I want to see a quantity, for example. Here's my on-hand quantity of those particular products now that I have inside of here. If I click on that particular area, I can also then see the detail related to it, right? So I can get to that detail. Now from an app perspective, as I navigate back here, let's do that deposit functionality. So what I want to do is I want to actually take a screenshot basically to go through and then take this particular form for that business case that we were talking about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set my form right there, put my flash on. Hopefully we get a nice picture here. There I've got the form that I took a photo of. I'm going to go ahead and then submit that at this point. And then from here, what I'm going to do finally, after it's gone through and it's done its text recognition, so it actually uses two different components with AI here. Number one, I trained a model to recognize this type of form. Number two, I went through and then made it so that it actually recognized most of the handwriting as well through handwriting recognition. And then number three, when I click on OK here, it's giving me feedback saying that it was successfully completed for that. And now if I go back into my deposit list here, I now have a digital record in CDS of that particular entry. And what I can also do is even go into that particular deposit and then see the text values that were actually recognized as part of that. So that's just a quick example of an AI model that's related to it. I can also, for example, click on the delete action, and this directly connects into the CDS model to actually go through and delete that. But also if I wanted to, just really quickly here, if I wanted to then create a requisition inside of finance and operations to go ahead and then create, for example, a very simple rec, I can go ahead and click on my action. I can say I want this particular request. I could, for example, set a project, a legal entity, or a project ID. I can click on my search. I can select, for example, I need a new mouse. I can click on the check mark here again. We can see it was successfully completed. And then also what I can do is I can go back into my request list right here if I want to, or requisition list, take a look and refresh it, and there's my particular requisition that's in here. I can click on my line items, so that way I can see what line items were added to that particular requisition, which it loads up and we see as well, so I can see that detail. But also then inside of finance and operations, when I actually go ahead and look at my purchase requisitions, you can see here is that particular entry, and then here is the requisition with that line on it for that particular product that I needed to be able to generate a requisition. Now, we could go further than this. I could have made it multi-line. I could have made it a gallery component where I can click on the plus button to add more lines as well as part of it. I guess the point here is that this took me about a day to create all of these different screens, all of these different connections. It's just really super easy to do. And so you can post back into finance and operations, you can post back to common data service, you can really control that look and feel, and overall just a fantastic experience for an end user to be able to do that. So that was kind of where I was going with it. So, I don't know what you guys think, but that was a lot of fun to go through. A lot of pain though too. There's lots of new concepts, like how do you pass variables from one screen to another, but once you understand it, it's super easy.
The images was a little harder.
Yeah. You just said something pretty profound. This is super easy. Let's not drop that. I mean, how profound is it to? I mean, most of the effort in something that Scott just highlighted is in understanding the business need and the requirements, proofing something out, saying, yeah, this is the direction that we want to go, and probably testing and debugging and getting it launched. Like the actual structure and development, yes, that does take time. That does take testing for sure. But, it's not like this is a completely ground up like ASP.NET solution or something like that. Like this is, it's ready to go. It's right there for you. Yes, there are some formulas and variables. We talked through some of those pieces, but I mean, anybody can jump into this, and there's a mountain of documentation out there to not only get you started, but to get you to the 102s, 103s, 201s, 301s, to really get you to those lower levels like Scott was talking about.
Yeah. I mean, just understanding colors, like understanding how to do transparency effects. Like, I mean, things that you take for granted initially, you've got to learn a little bit, right? So you've got to understand what color value means, and that these last two right here, for example, control the, the transparency effect related to it. So if I do 0, 0, it's fully transparent, right? So there's obviously, like you said, Adam, there's a little bit of learning that's involved with it, but comparatively, I didn't have to then create a function that then returns this. Everything's pretty much preset for me. So it is, a lot of the plumbing is already taken care of for you. It's just really that final stretch with it. So
I love the sun background too. Like I'm pretty sure that means that Confab is literally as powerful as the sun.
It is. That is absolutely correct. I've been looking for a way to use that image now for months. So I'm happy I was able to finally incorporate it. So anyways, guys, I know we're at the end of time. I've got to jump on to another meeting as well. I wanted to say thank you to everyone that was able to join. Today we had a lot of fun, obviously, going through and talking about those different concepts that we have in terms of Power Apps and how we apply them. If you guys have more questions about it, I mean, we just scratched the surface. Like there's so much more that we could have covered here. But if you do have questions, feel free to reach out to us or our team, and we'd be more than happy to show off those capabilities. So thank you again, and stay safe and keep coding. I forgot.
It's my geeky cameo, the geeky deliciousness.
Yeah.
It's my salt and pepper shakers. That's about it.
Oh, that's awesome. Love it. Love it.